Peggy woke up at 11 at night. Only a few minutes ago, he had been alarmed by the silence of the alarm clock. In his room, Vegas lit neon red numbers glowed. As always, when she woke up, she was happy thinking about her child. Even though he has no children, they are still his children. He volunteers only from midnight to 5 in the morning on weekdays. No one wants this. Some of his colleagues talk about him behind his back and say that he has no life, must be a little thin. But they don't dream of changing anything. The desire to work when they don't want to work suits everyone. Paige doesn't understand what makes most people angry, and they don't understand her either. But they lost, she thought. At 23:35 in the evening, he took a shower, got dressed, and left for work. She was looking forward to walking to church and seeing her children. His father once gave him some advice. Do something you love, and it won't feel like a job. It was the best gift he had ever given her, and the only one that didn't have a scar. Only someone who loves his job will jump into the nursery at 23:55 on Wednesday. Only those who know their duty will object to cynical comments on this issue. There are still 15 open plastic cases in the Jessup neonatal wing at Northern General Hospital in Sheffield. There is space, no warmth, no love. At least between 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Graveyard time, some of his colleagues put it. During the ceremony, a night security guard stood guard at the door of the church. As it stands right now, Jared usually gets the job done. He is a tall, burly man and speaks with a thick Sheffield accent. As he speaks on his cell phone, he hears his accent subtly transform into a Jamaican accent. He felt his voice was lost all over the field and that he sometimes had to speak to the hospital by phone. Visits at 10 p.m. may be approved by security personnel, but Jared has done his job this way. Call less attention to these hours. Playing football on your phone is worth your time. Good night, Nurse Warner. Whether he looked or not, he knew it was him. This is it. Just like tonight, she couldn't take her eyes off the phone. Or is it expected to happen every night now? Hello, Jared. She pulled back as soon as she signed her diary, not looking at him to avoid meeting his eyes. His hands were shaking as he unconsciously wrote his name in the logbook with a ballpoint pen, tied to the table with rope and old yellow duct tape. Nurse, your knee is better, he called out in a deep baritone voice. After returning to his own skin, excuse me, she muttered. My knee. As you said, I took a look at Will da Silva recently. However, she explained, there are some exercises that need to be done at home, and that's pretty much what she heard from him. His eyes never left the screen, which was like a child's toy in his hand. Oh yes. Very good. Well, that's true. This must be done. See you later. He answered quickly. He was uncomfortable with the sudden, unexpected attempt at conversation. She remembers asking him about his knee pain. She said she wasn't that kind of nurse, and that she would be better off seeing Verda, a physical therapist at South Wing Orthopedics. Finding a good nanny. You too, Jared. He put his bag on the floor under the nurse's table, just like he was at home. The church had yellow lights. The floor was a red rubber-like material. The lights above cast marshmallow light on the floor below, and thanks to the fluorescent lights, at night his vision is adjusted to be invisible. A white ribbon was tied to the floor as a sign of welcoming him and his little maid somewhere from the nursery. Peppa Pig, pretty a tightrope walker, went out of sight. She swings her dangerously along the rope and pretends to struggle to keep her balance. Only when entered the hospital room did Paige find his balance. She has the elegance of a ballerina. She is Princess Odette and will transform into a beautiful swan. The bed welcomes Peppa Pig with its cute bright orange color and delicious baby smell. Baby 421 was born a few hours ago, but is still intensive care as he is 5 premature. A WhatsApp group has been set up for the church to post daily updates. They are looking for data that may be born. The page made a graceful pas de deux in front of the little leaves. They graciously accepted with great applause and quiet satisfaction. Thanks to his sudden timing, the church is now empty after he returns home after the end of his transfer window. Before leaving, they said to her, "Good night, Peppa Pig. I hope you enjoy your work." It was her and the kids now, and that was something she had always enjoyed. He was disturbed by the activities placed in the church through the day. She always loves her own company and never seeks comfort from others, especially her baby's family, with whom she can never form a relationship. They disturb him like everyone else. He is now the only voice in the church, the sound of Skechers rubber soles as he prepares for his pre-game match. Notepad and pen in hand, he's happy to do so. As mentioned at the beginning of the shift, Paige checked on the sleeping child, notebooks clutched to her chest, pencils moving in and out from under her fingers. He counted out loud for the first time. 15 kids, check. As always, he counted again, enjoying the abundance of each number he brought to their hearts and minds. Count again, 15. Everyone is alive. Everything is in order, and I sleep comfortably. The bed is full of little roses of holiness. The blanket covers them like snow-covered peat. Paige looked up at the sacred flower. The sun elf blooming rose with its yellow petals, and the blissful scent on its head filled her with all earthly pleasure. His name's Hugo, and he sleeps with his chubby hand clenched into a fist over his face. She was one of the kids who had a colorful blanket, sky blue, while most of the other kids were white. A thin thread on Peggy's breastbone was filled with love from her deep sleep. He gushed, caressing her raven hair and almost woman's eyelashes. He could hear her breathing, slow, harsh, and stuck, like a distant generator. Kug-cough, kug-cough. To feel better, he held his breath and breathed in the sound of his clear exhalation. The peace he felt was more valuable than his salary. He was glad that there was no one around to protect him at such a moment. And the silence of the hospital room inspired his heart. Nothing bad will happen here. It was a dream come true, and he felt lucky to be swimming in. The red button used to call for help in emergencies anxiously at Peggy's complaint from the wall next to the nurse's station. His eyes never saw her, never approached her, never acknowledged her existence. There is no need for such a step during his term of office. This rose garden is its ruler, and every villain will take care to try the sapling's passion. When everything was fine and the flowers were there, he was very happy and went to his place. Write a letter. The table was stuck in a sterile, dreary puddle. He left the sleeping child and walked towards him. As he floated there unsatisfied, the darkness of the church swallowed him. Floats drifted downward from sleeping children. He doesn't care about managing the business and will do it as soon as possible. A light kept away from the darkness of the place is enough for him to write his article, but not enough to cause a fluorescent headache. He didn't know that his tongue was coming out of his mouth while he was writing. However, a few seconds after the pen touched the paper, the tip of its tongue began to bite it. The baby monkey suddenly made a loud noise. It made a loud noise, causing him to jump and throw the pen. Pen in the air, he could taste the red blood on his bitten tongue. Bitter disappointment rose in his throat, but he could only think of one thing: to protect your delicate rose. The child's loud voice filled the hospital room from top to bottom, filling his soul from top to bottom. The red bulge on the wall above the desk now looks a bit smug, ready for a call to arms. A gland pumped weapon-level adrenaline into his system. His reaction was almost prescient, from hearing the first sound to reacting. He dropped his notebook on the ground, knocked the table in front of the garden, then jumped from his chair and knocked over the table. He hit the light with his head, causing the shadows around him to change structurally. His Skechers were crunching and squealing like a racquetball player on amphetamines as he ran toward his baby. Paige is worried about what he will see. If anyone tried to take her precious flowers, she would tear their hearts out with turpentine fury. He was only a few feet away from the boy's desk, but the muddy air he was passing through was slowing down the local time. A few milliseconds passed. 1. Late. A. When he reached the bed, the bright bed seemed warm and comfortable. The voice of the banshee's child rose up and frightened him to the depths of his heart. His movements were fast and frantic. He ran at a high speed along the white line of the table, but tried to stop just in front of the bed, nearly losing his footing as his tires irritated the floor. He turned back and shouted to his children. She was worried and afraid, but she was ready for anything she could find. As he turned towards the bed, ready to defend or attack, a sudden silence fell around him. The children altogether silenced all voices. The perfect silence was broken by the sound of screams, and the loud noise allowed him to hear. Everything seemed to stop, and he could not understand the cause of the trumpet-like noise in the church, which lasted for several minutes and suddenly stopped. No child moves anymore. Breathing is weak. No child cries. No child knows that he is a part of it. But he heard them. Real sounds of fear and anxiety that the panic button would approve of. Now everything is quiet again, but he was still afraid. She made a noise as she covered her mouth, completely stunned. There is no explanation as to what happened. While investigating the children, he moves away from them, hoping for something to control Machiavelli's machine or a secret intervention. But they sleep on her flower. He examined them one by one and quickly looked back to prepare for an attack from behind. He knelt down and checked under the bed to see if there was anything hidden, but there was nothing and no one could see. There are no ghouls, ghosts, or diaper ravers. Paige was sure this was something he wasn't expecting. He knows what is right and what is wrong. He admitted it was a dream. His father would often pat him on the head. "Ope, boo ears, stop daydreaming and pour the tea." So he knew he liked to play with his head sometimes. But this is not one of those times. How can calm appear in the midst of the storm? He was attuned to the place and its rhythm, controlling the clutches instinctively, but he could still feel them being listened to. All seems peaceful now, though, and the babies seem unaffected. Paige, uneasy, went back to the nurse's station to clear up the mess. She's out, but there's still a little bit of her left. He had never seen such a hostile or ignorant church before, but he had to admit that he looked at it with suspicion now. This is often a place of optimism and blooming potential, not fear or doubt. But now everything feels like a murder weapon waiting to be stabbed or bludgeoned. The curtains were surrounded by malevolent gazes, waiting for him to let his guard down and prepare to attack. Hidden figures swirled in the oily shadows of his peripheral vision, ready to kidnap children. He realized that the distance between the table and the child was too much. This isn't good, she told herself. She needs to be close to her child. Having made up his mind, he moved his chair from the edge of the table towards the bed in the dark. He moved the chair as quietly as he could, not wanting to wake the sleepers for fear of causing further damage. He bent down and carefully placed the chair in front of him. The children are sleeping. It monitors the contact of the chair's legs with the floor to ensure placement is made with minimal noise. He breathed a satisfied sigh as he silently completed the maneuver. Everything is calmed down in church. His heart can go into his mouth and his stomach can get its act together. He slowly sat down on the child's seat. The air was sucked out of the seat. They have soft cushions to sit on. The note dropped into her lap like a kitten, and she looked back at the children to make sure they were safe. What he saw made his blood run cold as the North Sea. His hair tingled, tardigrades of fear spread through his flesh, and his intestines struggled in place. What he didn't know was that a slow scream came from his body as he came across all the babies standing on the bed, their heads slightly higher than the crib, everyone staring intently at him without blinking. Thick fingers gripped the edges of the mattress, gripping them tightly to help keep them steady on frozen legs. Her scream caused 2-day-old Jacob to blink slowly like a drunken diver. 14-hour Olivia looked at him with the mysterious look of a professional hairdresser. Lakshmi watched him closely, unblinkingly, with the cold detachment of a department store detective. But all 15 children stood up to see. Evaluate. It's like they have a newfound secret that he doesn't have. As her screams faded away, she, like the rest of the church, heard and felt her heartbeat in her ears. The children stood motionless on legs that had not yet supported their weight. It would still be weeks before they could stand, walk, talk, or feel pain. But here they are, doing at least 2 of those things. Nobody will believe this. He didn't believe in himself. It was a night full of nightmares fueled by eating cheese before bed. His throat stung and burned from the sudden anger he had just unleashed. Peggy slowly rose from her chair and looked at the babies, afraid of what they would do next. The forgotten document fell from her lap and onto the floor, causing her to briefly scream again. Children don't care about his flaws. He looked at the blood-red paper on the ground, then turned back to the boy. The quality of their eyes is different now because they don't have emotions or even if they do, they can't decide. The eyes never left him. The church was deliberately silent, but as he stood up, he heard the lungs of a group of children breathing. Peggy approached the babies cautiously, her legs too weak to look them in the eye, but they were more than willing to focus their attention on her. She walked among the children. When he passed, they would turn each time to adjust their position on the bed, making sure they weren't obstructing his view or creating fear in his chest. Paige was taken aback by the strangeness of the situation. He has never been afraid or different from other people, and even the abuse he suffered from his father in his youth can weaken his heart even further. The babies continue to watch him, not interested in him as a person but seem fascinated by him as a scientific model. What happened? He whispered to himself, hoping to get an answer or make sense of what he saw. Greater than his mental state deteriorates, fear rises within him. His conflicts with her both make him happy and make him worse, binding him to fear. The taste of blood on his bitten tongue could still be felt. It tasted amazing, with bile rising from his esophagus. He thought a lot. He couldn't understand the anger of the situation in front of him. How can they stay quiet when kids yell at them? How do they stand? He wondered if he should use the panic button. But for what exactly? What was the emergency? Where was the danger? Who could be hurt or die? In ICU, there was constant, real danger, and lives were on the line. People had to be there, and he couldn't call them back. He was unable to find help for this benign condition. But this isn't good for him or his mental health. This sounds very disturbing. He has been working at the church for 5 years and has never heard of anything so unusual. From everything he'd seen here, he had no idea that kids were acting like schizophrenics. He knew they would be sick, vomiting and swallowing. He was saddened to learn that many people had died, and when they resurrected and died, he took the belongings of his workers with him. However, everything he saw in the hospital was normal and could be interpreted as natural. This is not natural. Perhaps if she has children from her womb, she will understand how to comfort them like a mother. How do we calm them down and get them to go back to sleep like a baby? But he wanted this every night. The children were still staring at him coldly, like a statue. It doesn't move. What are you looking at? He shouted and became more angry and angry with every second. She was wet from head to toe with discomfort. She got very angry and shouted but failed to disturb the audience. They stood determined, silent, and maddeningly patient. But why? Are they waiting for something? Maybe his brain will explode. Please stop looking at me. This is not normal, he shouted, stamping his foot on the ground. His eyes filled with tears of disappointment. As he holds the bed in front of him, he asks the baby who is looking at him, "Why are you looking at me?" Yell. Savish, who had just spent the day, knew his name. He knew all their names. But these are not the roses he has been tending and watering for the past few nights. They are now biting. Fixed-minded weeds seems like a child, but being placed here allows him to get over this confusion. Who knows, maybe it will make noise at night. This completely broke his heart. She now knows that her roses are rotting on the vine. Little Savish stood and looked at his face and dark eyes as he thought about all the anger. He didn't laugh, cry, only look. The kids seemed to have lost their manners. Now he is just a product of mental torture. They use their patience to get through it. To leave, he shouted at them in shock. It hurts that their love for him seems to have passed. She knew she needed help. Come to think of it, Peppa thought they were just kids. It's hard to believe, but they are. They are babies. In bandages. For God's sake, act like you care. Don't allow his father's prophecy, he told himself. He now insults her. You're such a disgrace, just like your useless mother. The last thing he needs right now is for his ghost to make his heart darker than a baby's. Thank God, he was out of her life, but she didn't want him in her heart. After that, an idea suddenly came to his mind. A mobile phone. And Francet. He was sure Francet would work tonight. Maybe it helps. He is the emergency room doctor at Hanksman House. He can call and manage him. get his advice. Francette is his friend, so to speak. They had a very busy lunch together at the restaurant. Both have been shown to be unable to interact with each other, but they both understand their insecurities and seem to get along well with each other, creating their own quirks together.